Hey everybody, it's Kurt. I just wanted to interrupt this episode to let you guys know real exciting news. Tim and I are going to be at BX Arabia moderating a couple roundtables as well as interviewing some of the fantastic guests that they have there. And it's all going to be live November 9th, 2021. That's coming up soon. And it's free. So please, if you are at all interested to get a non-European and US perspective on behavioral science, listen up. Go Google BX Arabia. Tim and I will be there. It's going to be a lot of fun. Hope to see you there. Welcome to Behavioral Grooves, the podcast that explores stories, science, and secrets from the world's brightest thought leaders around the human experience. I'm Kurt Nelson.
And I'm Tim Houlihan. We examine human behavior through a behavioral science lens, helping you improve your relationships, your well-being, and your organization.
Our conversations are always fun and enlightening, but sometimes, Tim, I find them a bit worrisome.
Worrisome? In what way?
Well, this month's theme of conspiracy theories. I'm finding that my hope in the idea that sound, rational thought, and good solid evidence can be used to combat the crazy ideas that have seemed to multiply and expand in our society over the past few years and with all of our aunts and uncles.
Especially the uncles.
It's always the uncles. It's always the uncles, Tim.
I get that. It does sometimes feel like there is a massive uphill battle against common sense and rational thinking. And that talking with these experts highlights that difficulty. Absolutely. But Kurt, I think that understanding why people believe in conspiracy theories and understanding the different ways that are most effective in getting them to see reason is actually a very positive thing. It kind of reinvigorates me.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah. No, I get that. I suppose you're right. It's better to understand why people believe in crazy conspiracy theories, and particularly what, if anything, we can do to show them the light. But dang, sometimes it feels overwhelming.
Oh my God. Because it is.
Yeah, it is. Sometimes it is. That crazy uncle, man, that's sometimes crazy uncles are hard to deal with.
Yeah, but don't you think that this episode wasn't so much overwhelming as it was enlightening, to get back to use a word that you were using, and that our conversation with our guests revealed some really cool ways to overcome some of these crazy hurdles?
Yeah, you are right, and so we have Lee McIntyre to thank for that. Lee is a research fellow at the Center for Philosophy and History of Science at Boston University and is an instructor in ethics at Harvard Extension School. He has had a distinguished career in teaching and researching issues that we found fascinating, but none of those were as fascinating as his new book, How to Talk to a Science Denier.
The book begins with a fascinating story about how Lee attended a flat Earth convention and how he ended up having some very interesting discussions with people while he was there. We wanted to catch up with him about the experience and what a philosophy professor thinks about conspiracy theories and flat earthers, for that matter.
Yeah, well, and most importantly, we had a fascinating discussion with Lee to learn the most important thing you can do when you're talking with a science denier, or as I like to say it, Uncle Tom.
What's the most important thing, Kurt?
Well, it's a conspiracy theory, so I can't tell you about what it is. And you're going to have to listen. You're going to have to listen to the conversation that we had in order to find out.
Oh, God, that's cruel. It just feels a little bit torturous.
You think it's torturous? You really think it's torturous?
Well,
I mean, we just are making it. They just have to listen to an hour of us blabbering on. I guess that is torture. Actually, okay. So with that, here, I'm letting the cat out of the bag, as they say.
Good.
All right.
Do.
All right.
You just let the cat out of the bag.
Okay. The most important thing to do when you're having a conversation with a science denier is to talk over them as loudly as you can. That is exactly. Wait. No, wait. I got that wrong. No. Actually, the best thing you can do is to listen.
Wow. That's profound.
Are you listening, Tim? Are you listening to me?
Did you say something? I'm sorry.
It is. No, it's to listen. And I think that's a really important thing. Now, Lee talks about a number of other things that we can do, but that is, I think, one of the ultimate pieces that we have here is to, in the conversation, listen.
Yeah, good. Well, I can relax now. Thank you for that. And by the way, Groovers, you can too, because this whole month we're talking to experts about science deniers, conspiracy theorists, and how we can really get off track in our thinking from time to time. We want to have a conversation with you about this, so we've set up a special Twitter hashtag conspiracy grooves, where you can share your stories about that Uncle Tom or your friend or your coworker who believes in whatever crazy conspiracy theories that they do. And you can tell us all about that.
Right. And we want to have you talk about how you've dealt with them. Did you avoid that topic? Did you confront them? Did you yell at them? Or did you bite your tongue and change the topic? Or did you actually engage in conversation and listen to what they're saying? So let's share our stories and let's learn from one another. Again, that is hashtag conspiracy grooves. Go out there on Twitter and we'll have the conversation going. And we want to definitely hear from you out there.
Yeah, it'd be cool. We would absolutely love to hear from everybody, including our guests for that matter.
Yeah. All right. That would be cool. Also, one other thing, Tim, and this is not a conspiracy theory. This is not a conspiracy theory by any way. This isn't even science denial. This is science acceptance, this next piece here.
Good.
Okay.
Let's end on a up note then.
All right.
So like this. Okay.
If you are a leader in an organization or someone who knows a leader, which most of us do, right? You know, we work for somebody, they're a leader. You might be a leader. Anyway, we want to remind you that our Leading Human Playbook and Workbook are available for purchase on our website. And these two documents give you some of the best ideas garnered from our own research, as well as conversations that we've had on this podcast with our fantastic guests on how to lead a more human-centered workplace. And that will help you build engagement and satisfaction with your employees. And that in this day and age of the Great Resignation, just might come in handy. And Tim, not only that.
There's more?
There's more.
I love it.
We will throw in the return to work module for free. We'll throw that in for free, Tim.
No charge. We're giving that away, basically.
We're just giving it away.
Zero
it is just
money.
Our gift to those people. But wait, there's more, Tim.
No, there can't be more. Really? Are you giving away more, Kurt?
There is more. If you use the promo code Groovers, that's GROOVERS, you get a $20 discount on the purchase for a limited time only. So
you're basically giving away money is what you're doing.
We giving away money, giving away information, and giving people this wonderful insights on how they can go about some tips, some tactics, some understanding about reasons why we should all be focusing in on a more human-centered workplace. So
right. And how to put it into practice.
That's how to put it into practice. There's a workbook with it. It's not just the playbook. It's not the plays, but it's the work. You got to, get your hands dirty on this stuff. Yeah. And you can go in there and then you can start using it with your teams, or your boss can use it on his or her teams. It's fantastic. So
love that.
All right. Oh my God. I feel like should be on some, late night, shop TV kind of thing. Sorry about that, folks, but really, it's a good thing, and we are really proud of it. And please, if you have any interest in it, go out and give it a check. There's a free download too. That's just a white paper on it. You can get a little bit more.
We believe in it, and we hope that you'll enjoy it.
Yes. Okay. So with that, it is time to get to our conversation with Lee, and we hope that you sit back with a 2-finger pour of crazy uncle beliefs and enjoy our conversation with Lee McIntyre.
Lee McIntyre, welcome to Behavioral Grooves.
Thank you so much for having me.
It is great to have you here, and we're going to get started with a speed round, which, as our listeners know, oftentimes isn't very speedy, but we do want to start with simple questions. So, would you rather have dinner with your favorite musician or athlete?
Musician, definitely.
Excellent answer. And does anyone come to mind?
Paul McCartney.
Fantastic.
Lee, you've just gone up on the ladder on Tim's likability scale. He's much more in tune with you now. I have an easy question. Coffee or tea? Which is your preferred drink?
I'm not really crazy about either one, but if I had to pick, I'd say tea.
Okay, so if you had a larger set to choose from, what would you typically choose?
Lemonade, I guess.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
Fantastic.
So how do you get along? So do you have any sources of caffeine in your life?
How do I get along?
Yeah, how do you get along?
I've just never been a coffee I mean, caffeine kind of drives me a little insane. I can't even drink regular Coke with caffeine in it. I have to get to caffeine free. So I'm just not a caffeine guy. I'm wired enough already.
I love that. I love that. Okay. So are coal miners more likely to believe in climate change or just flat out deny its existence?
I do not have a large enough sample. I've spoken with 3 coal miners and they all believed in climate change. So that tells me 100% of, if I were a Bayesian, I'd think, well, 100%, but I did ask those 3 coal miners what other people thought, and they felt more or less that it was about a third, a third, and a third. That is, a third believed in it, a third didn't, and a third just kind of, wouldn't really say.
Interesting. All right, Lee. Here's the last speed round question.
Mm-hmm.
Going to a flat Earth convention, is that a fun, relaxing 2-day adventure or a stressful exploration into human psychology?
The latter. and I've done it. So I know the answer to this.
That leads into, so you have written a fantastic book, How to Talk to a Science Denier. And with that, you start the book out with this wonderful story about your, well, not adventure, your 2-day stressful exploration into a Flat Earth Society convention. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. The first thing to know is that I didn't go to the Flat Earth Society. It was a Flat Earth International Conference. The Flat Earth International Conference folks hate the Flat Earth Society and vice versa. It's kind of like the People's Front of Judea and the Judean People's Front in Life of Brian. I mean, don't get those confused. I never quite figured out what the squabble was, but they don't like one another. So in November 2018, I bought the ticket and went to the Flat Earth International Conference. And it was a 2-day thing. There were 650 folks there in the ballroom at a hotel. And it was quite something. I mean, I didn't really know what to expect, I guess. But there were musical acts. There were they had a comedian there. They had quote unquote scientific presentations, and it was a joyous thing for the people who believed in flat Earth. I mean, they are routinely persecuted for their belief at their jobs, in their church, and their family. So some of them don't even say that they're flat earthers. But when they came there, they were amongst friends, and it was easy for them to make friends. My experience was a bit of an odd one because that first day, I didn't want to say much. I didn't want to let them know who I was that first day. I just wanted to listen. I wanted to see what they said. But of course, since people were coming up and introducing themselves, I had to be careful because I didn't want to lie. I knew that the second day I was going to say, well, I'm a philosopher of science from Boston, and, I don't believe in flat Earth. So main question that people would ask when they met you was, so how did you get into flat Earth? I say, well, it's a fascinating topic, isn't it? Or when people ask me to identify my beliefs, I'd say I'm a skeptic. Well, I'm a Humean skeptic, I'm a Byronian skeptic. I don't, I didn't expand on that. But, I am a skeptic. I'm a philosopher. So, I did my best. Mostly, I just listened. I wanted to hear what they had to say. And I'm really glad I did, because I think that, number one, that builds trust to listen. And number two, it helped me to realize that what they believed was about an inch thick. They had an answer for everything. But when you pushed them, they couldn't go beyond a certain point. And it's because they kind of have the same talking points, which I heard over and over and over at the seminars. And, once you've heard that enough times and, you form questions, then you can push back against them a little bit. So I'm kind of glad I waited.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
with hearing the same thing over and over and over again, you still had some kind of ahas that came away from
Yes.
that. Yeah, can you share some of those?
Well, one of the ahas was based on individual conversations. So, you're sitting there listening to the presentations from the stage and you hear the same thing. But I wanted to grab people between events, just, ordinary people sitting in the audience like me, and, ask them, how did you get into flat Earth? And routinely, they all started off as what they call globalists, as we all are. That's the kind word. But then they changed, and almost always they changed due to a breach of trust in their life. Something happened in their life. Sometimes it was personal, sometimes it was health related, a divorce. There was something that knocked them out of their complacency. And once they began to question, who's lying to me? Who can I trust? That rabbit hole went very deep. For some of them, it was not, for quite a number of them, it was 9/11, because they would watch 9/11 happening on their TV and think, that can't be real. There's got to be more to the story. This is a fake. Who's behind this? Well, if you're going to question the truth of 9/11, what else comes into play? Now, not everybody who questioned the truth of 9/11 went down the rabbit hole of flat Earth, but sometimes people will get on the internet and just, on a lark, they'll say, well, flat Earth, that should be easy to refute. And they'll call up a video. And they're very slickly produced. And when you get on YouTube and you watch one, you'll get 20.
Mm-hmm.
And then the mindset seems to be, well, I can't tell what's wrong with this. Maybe it's true. And once you do that, and then you go to a convention, it's too late. You go to the conventions are used to recruit people. I don't know if they self-consciously think of it that way, but there's such a social aspect to belief that once you're amongst 649 other people who believe what you believe, there's really no going back.
So you titled the book, How to Talk to a Science Denier. You talked to a number of these people that were there. Did you change anybody's minds in any of those conversations?
Notice that the title of the book is not How to Convince a Science Denier or How to Convert a Science Denier. It's how to talk to, right? Talking is the first step to convincing. And no, I didn't convince anybody on the spot. But what I've since learned, and after this and more research, is you can't treat it like a hit and run. You can't just have, as a stranger come in, question their most basic beliefs, share some facts, and then walk away and expect them to say what a fool I was. It just doesn't work like that. One thing that I learned is that science denial, on flat Earth, on evolution, on climate change, is kind of all based on the same type of reasoning. And it's most fundamentally based on identity. It's not based on facts and evidence, though they will tell you that it is. It's based on identity, which means that if you're going to convince somebody to give up their belief, it's sort of like getting them to give up their religion. And how are you going to do that? The only way to do that is to build trust. And I think the best way to build trust is through face-to-face conversation, which is what I was there to do, right? I was there to have face-to-face conversations. And so I think I did build some trust. And I did learn how to talk to them. That is to say, by listening to them. In every single conversation I had, there was a moment when they said, don't you think I'm right? Or what do you think? And then that's my opportunity to say, well, it occurs to me that, you brought up some interesting points, but there's an inconsistency here. And then they'll say, well, what's that? And then they're listening to me, right? And of course, I'm not going to say something that's going to blow them out of the water and, they tear off their lanyard. But I am planting the seed of doubt, right? Yeah. By asking questions like, well, you tell me that every picture from NASA is faked, yet you just put up on the screen a picture of, the skyline of the city of Chicago from 60 miles out in Lake Michigan. How do you know that's not faked?
Mm-hmm.
And then the answer is, well, because I know the guy who did it and because I went out and recreated that shot myself. I'll say, oh, okay, so now we're talking about evidence. Can we talk about evidence for a minute? Yeah. Okay. Then we're having a conversation.
You're getting into the opportunity to have those conversations as opposed to forcing them on. We've talked with Vanessa Bonds, who just wrote a fantastic book called You Have More Influence Than You Think. And one of the things that she talks about in that is that in those personal conversations, we do as humans tend to influence others a lot more than we even realize we do. And that face-to-face interaction is much more powerful than, say, through an email or even through Zoom and different pieces like that. So obviously you've seen that work in the work that you're doing in different pieces, but I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah. But belief is social, right? And I was part of the social group. I was a small part of the social group, but I was there having these conversations with them, providing some, mechanism for questioning. Sometimes I would have these conversations with a speaker who had just come off stage, and we would attract a little mini audience around us. And maybe I was planting the seed of doubt. Maybe I'm not going to convince the speaker, but maybe I'm planting a seed of doubt, for the other folks. And, just by showing up, that impressed them. Now they use that as an opportunity to try to convert me, but that was they liked that. They liked the fact that I was there talking to them. And as you say, there's something about face-to-face conversation that builds trust. There's something about taking someone seriously and think of not the argument seriously necessarily, but the person. Think about how people imagine a conversation with a flat earther. They'll call them a name. They'll walk away. They'll say, "Oh, that's ridiculous. How can you believe that?" Well, where's the conversation go from there, right? One of the seminars was based on a guy who ran a street clinic on flat Earth, and he was giving advice about how to talk to globalists to convert them into flat Earth. His advice was the same as my advice for how to get them out. Don't yell at them. Don't be insulting. Plant the seed of doubt. Don't treat it as a hit and run. Preserve the relationship. Suggest that they do further research. Same thing. I took that guy out to dinner and we talked for 2 hours. That was fascinating. That guy was incredible. He was so smart. He was so talented, but so deluded in what he thought. It was a fascinating conversation.
Well, you talked to a couple of people, if I recall correctly, more than once, that you would come back and you had multiple conversations. And I think about my own experience with some unnamed relatives who have very strong convictions in conspiracy
I've got
theories,
them too.
and how and how difficult it is for me to come back to those conversations. It's just so much easier to push them aside. That when they and it's typically they're bringing it up and challenging me that I'm not aware of all the my information sources are really limited, and then it's just so much easier to just kind of push it off. So I'm kind of curious about sort of the personal challenge of how hard was it to actually continue to engage in this discussion over and over and over again with folks.
Well, once I'd made the decision to go, I mean, that was it. The point was to have the conversations. So
you were in, you were committed.
I was in, right? Yeah. But I mean, what you say is interesting because people don't like uncomfortable conversations and they'll avoid them, especially maybe with a friend or relative that they know they want to preserve the relationship with and they're going to see again. So in some ways, maybe it's almost easier to have a conversation with a stranger about an uncomfortable topic. And sometimes we're also the most disrespectful to our family and friends, right? So, I mean, can be a problem. I'm a philosopher, so I'm used to arguing. I'm used to this. And I was not there to talk to them about the evidence for against flat Earth. I was there to talk to them about their reasoning strategy. So when they came up with a conspiracy theory, I would say, why do you believe that? And then they would tell me, and I'd say, well, now, wait a minute, you're a skeptic, right? Yes. But you're skeptical of, this, that, and the other, but you're not skeptical of this conspiracy theory. What's your evidence? And then if they had a shred of evidence, they would share it. But the insidious thing about conspiracy theories is if there's no evidence, they'll say, well, that just shows you how good the conspirators are.
Yeah.
At which point I'd say, now, wait a minute. So you're taking both evidence and lack of evidence as proof that your conspiracy theory is right. Mm-hmm. Why can't I do that for the global Earth? And then they go, plant that seed of doubt. Yeah. So they had never really been challenged, I think, on their logic.
Yeah.
They had people say, haven't you read Isaac Newton? Or, call them names or, present. I mean, the desire to debunk them is just overwhelming. I mean, I could just taste it. I wanted to just pull something out of my back pocket and just blow up the whole thing. But you cannot do it, right? There's no fact that you can pull out of your back pocket that they haven't already heard and prepared against. If you say, well, what about the tides? What about the seasons? What about the eclipses of the moon? They've got an answer for all of that. It's not a great answer. Sometimes it conflicts with other things they believe. But that's when I say their knowledge is about an inch thick, right?
Yeah.
They've got an answer for all that. So you're on their turf if you're having that conversation. Instead, I would say things like, well, if you believe in evidence, tell me what evidence could prove you wrong. And they'd say, wait a minute, what do you mean? I'd say, well, you said you're a scientist. Every scientist can tell you what would prove them wrong. I mean, you've asked for proof. Science isn't about proof.
Yeah.
Science is about, science is not Euclidean geometry. You change your mind when you get new evidence. Don't you do that? Well, of course I do. Well, okay, so tell me what evidence could convince you were wrong. They were not prepared for that.
Yeah. You talk about the 5 common factors of science denial in the book. And I was wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit about those, because you're kind of talking about them here, cherry picking of evidence, right? Like, oh, I'm only going to look at this, this reliance on fake experts and having those answers and, committing the logical errors that you're just talking about. So could you talk a little bit about those 5 or at least a couple of them?
Yeah. So this is based on some research. It was originally come up with by the Hufnagel brothers, and then John Cook and Stephen Lewandowski are cognitive scientists who really codified this. This is a cool idea. Their idea is that all science denial reasoning follows the same blueprint: anti-evolution, climate denial, flat earth, anti-vax. It follows this pattern. Number 1, cherry picking evidence. Number 2, belief in conspiracy theories. Number 3, illogical reasoning. Number 4, reliance on fake experts. And number 5, belief that science has to be perfect. That last one is my favorite. And let me just say a word about that, because to say that science has to be perfect represents an opportunity to have a further conversation, because that person actually believes in science. They're just disappointed, right? Because science is not what they thought it was. And so that's my opportunity as a philosopher of science to say, well, scientists believe in uncertainty. I think they should be embracing uncertainty more, the humility of not knowing all the answers. But when you've gathered enough evidence and it suggests that something is true, then, it's more probably true, but you still have to test it against the evidence. That's what science is about. And so for a lot of people, that's a kind of an epiphany for them to realize that science is not about truth and certainty. So, I mean, that's just one aspect. That's one thing you can talk about. And the really exciting thing is that after I got back from Flat Earth the next summer, there was a paper published in the journal Nature by 2 researchers, Cornelia Batch and Philip Schmid, that took those 5 tropes and used those as a script to convince science deniers that they were wrong. So, and I joke with my friends that I could have read that study if my hair were on fire, right? Because it confirmed what I already believed, right? So of course, I've got cognitive bias like anyone else. But I mean, here was the first empirical evidence. Content rebuttal worked. If you're a scientist and you approach it in the right way, that can work. But also what they call technique rebuttal based on these 5 tropes. And of course, as much as I loved that study, it was done online with a fairly naive audience who hadn't heard a lot of scientific disinformation before. So of course, as a philosopher, I wanted to push it and say, could it work on hardcore people? And how about face-to-face rather than online? That's, and because I had just gotten back from Flat Earth. And so, I had done the hardcore face-to-face thinking, would this work that they've discovered actually work there? My opinion was I needed more help. I needed some scientists there. I needed, one person against 649 others was, that's tough odds.
Yeah.
Well, we talked with Andy Norman just a little while ago, and he was all about going to the next convention with you. So he was saying that he's going to join you if he can. So
Andy's a good friend, but I've never gotten him to say that. So he said it to you. So
Yeah.
good, and I'll watch what happens. Now I've got him though, and but I also did hear back from some physicists. After Flat Earth, I did an article in the American Journal of Physics called "Calling All Physicists," and pointed out that at this Flat Earth convention, I witnessed a conversation on the first day where they were giddy over the fact, it was a rumor, I'm not sure that it was true, that there was a physics convention down the street, but they had never come over to Flat Earth because they were afraid of them. They would not come because they were in on the conspiracy and they knew that the Earth was actually flat. And so I'm trying to get physicists and others interested in this. And I have gotten a few. One remarkable fellow, Bruce Sherwood, who's a fairly famous physicist, wrote me back and said, yeah, this is interesting. And he developed a computer model based entirely on flat Earth assumptions. I mean, nothing outside of what they believe that reveals the contradictions in their views.
Yeah.
And we're going to go to the next one, rent a booth if we can, and show this model. So, COVID has put a little monkey wrench into that plan until there's another Flat Earth International Conference. But we're going to go with the next opportunity.
A couple questions from your previous conversation about the common factors of science denial, that tropes that you're talking about.
Yeah.
One of the things that you talked about, that ending, is like science has to be perfect in different pieces. Yeah. And I'm wondering, from your perception, because we've talked with others about conspiracy theories and different pieces, and one of the things that kind of keeps coming up is that as Americans, and I don't know if it's the rest of the world, that we are pretty poor at understanding of how science works. And I'm wondering your perception of the educational system's ability to teach science, or to teach the idea that science is this continually testing and evaluation of things, and it isn't about final proof. It is the predominance of evidence and all of the factors that go into good science. And do we do a good enough job in our educational system from your perspective? And if not, is there anything that you thought of about how we could go about doing that better?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because by the time we're adults, and this is true whether people trust science or not, they really don't understand how it works. I'm not sure that the people in the 1950s, who were all in 60s, who were mesmerized by science, the Americans really understood it. What I think we could do in our education system is spend more time in science class on how scientists reason. A lot of what, now in my day, when I was in elementary school, science was science appreciation. Look at all these geniuses who came up with truth. Aren't we lucky to live in this era in which all truth has finally been revealed? They never taught the history of science. They never, other than, a few things about, some accident that, turned out to, lead to some cure for something. We never knew that scientists made any mistakes, or that, they didn't know exactly how things were going to turn out. And that's training people to respect scientists, I suppose, but not to become one, not to think like they do. And I think that the most important thing about science is their curiosity and their flexibility to change their mind based on new evidence. I wrote a whole book, or my book just before this is called The Scientific Attitude, where I argue that the really distinctive thing about science is that they care about evidence, and they're willing to change their mind on the basis of new evidence. That shows you why uncertainty is so important. That shows you the ability to grow from new knowledge. I mean, that's an incredible thing to say, I want to believe that X is true. Let me test it. The evidence from nature is showing me that it's not true. My belief must be wrong. If you just think about that in the history of humanity as a form of reasoning, that is incredible. That is rare, and we should do more of that. I think they should teach that to elementary school kids. not just, about Newton and Einstein and, all the things that they do, but also a little bit of the history, a little bit of how they, got where they are. I think that would be a great boon.
The second question that came up from your conversation there, you talked about going back and potentially getting a booth and having this component. And I was wondering, thinking about that, when you went last time, it was in that conversational tone. It was in this, let's explore together kind of non-threatening piece.
Yes.
Wondering if setting up a booth and having, that, are you setting up a different dynamic in that, and what that might imply for how the conversations go, as opposed to, some of the other pieces of that?
You raised a good point, and it hasn't been an active point yet because there's no, we haven't made plans, haven't gone, but I should keep that in mind because it might change the dynamic. And I'll tell you the other thing that might change the dynamic is if we have somebody there to film, right? Because that nothing will erode trust more than a camera on somebody's shoulder. Though there is a flat Earth movie, a documentary called Behind the Curve, where somebody did just exactly this. They went to a flat Earth convention and interviewed people about their beliefs. So those. But you raise a strong point. I'll have to think. Maybe what I should do is split up the duties and have Bruce do the content rebuttal at the booth, and Andy and I will circulate in the crowd with technique rebuttal. And
there you go.
See how that works. Now, you might wonder why even do it. Why take them seriously when there's all this other type of science denial in the world, like COVID denial that's killing us, and climate denial. And I've just asked my own question here, so I'll answer it.
Thank you, because actually that was coming up for me, so you're saving me time.
The reason is because I think, given the fact that all science denial is the same, all follows the same blueprint, if I could learn how to talk to a flat earther, then I can learn how to talk to other science deniers as well, the ones for whom the stakes are much higher. I no longer think that flat Earth is completely benign either. I think that it creates a culture of denial, kind of. And the other thing is, if things have gotten really that bad, that suggests that we do live in a denialist culture. I mean, people see it as a fringe movement. Quite a significant percentage of, it's hard to get reliable numbers, but quite a significant percentage of the population of Brazil, I think it's 7%, are flat earthers. There's a terrific book coming out soon by a researcher in Texas named Ashley Landrum, who's a psychologist, and she's written an entire book on flat earthers. So I'll bet she's got some, we've only got a chapter on this. She's got a whole book coming out. So, I bet there's more material here. But the reason I'm so passionate about this too is science denial has been around for a long time, but it's getting worse. And it's not only is it growing amongst the people who are already deniers, but now we've got this moment when denialist culture has consumed our politics. That those same 5 tropes of reasoning are behind Stop the Steal and behind the people who say that the insurrectionists at the U.S. Capitol were just peaceful protesters. Those beliefs too are based on conspiracy theories, cherry-picking evidence, illogical reasoning, fake experts. It's the same. It's the same strategy. QAnon, dare I even mention it, right? Something like 15% of Americans are believers in QAnon. This is creeping up on us. It's not just flat Earth that I'm worried about. I'm worried about flat Earth being kind of the canary in the coal mine here.
Have you thought about or figured any elements out about why this is happening at this point in time? As you said, we've had science deniers from the first time we've ever had science. But it seems, and maybe this isn't real, again, I don't have any evidence on this, but it feels like that it's growing, right? That the amount of people who are active science deniers is growing, and they're getting louder and they're getting more active. As you said, 15% of people, QAnon, it just, that blows my mind when you said that. So I don't know if you have any thoughts behind that.
So I always want to be careful here because I don't want to make it sound like our current era is the worst it's ever been in human history. Okay. So yes, science denial has always existed, but compare it to something where we are now with, you know, Galileo or
Yeah.
I just
And the
got back
Catholic
from
Church. Yeah.
I just got back from a trip to Rome where I stood before the statue of Giordano Bruno, who was burned at the stake for believing that the stars were other suns with planets going around them. So, I mean, those are consequences. That's a denial culture, right?
Yeah.
So I don't want to make it sound like things are, so much worse now, but it is nonetheless shocking that we are where we are because it has gotten worse in the world, especially in the United States, over the last 20 years, as compared to where we were, 50 years ago. And I think that the reason is because it's so easy now for misinformation and disinformation to be propagated. Modern science denial started with the tobacco companies in the 50s, who were threatened by this idea that scientists were going to discover that cigarette smoking was linked to lung cancer. And so they hired a public relations expert to come in and speak to them at the Plaza Hotel in New York. And he said, fight the science, create doubt. They started a precursor to the American Tobacco Institute, hired their own scientists. They took out full-page ads in American newspapers. And that was the blueprint for what happened later with climate denial and ozone denial and, all of it, acid rain. That story's in Naomi Oreskes' book and Eric Conway, Merchants of Doubt. So it is worse now, especially over the last 20 years. And I think it is because of the internet. It's because of social media. That cognitive bias is built into our brains from the primordial era. That confirmation bias, motivated reasoning, all of the thing that Kahneman and Tversky talk about is there, and it's dry kindling, waiting for a spark. Well, and that spark is disinformation. But what happens when there's an accelerant too, to push the analogy till it screams? The internet. What happens when the internet is the gasoline, right? So that when that disinformation hits, boom. And most of the people, I think that the growth in science denial is from people who are no longer just, seeing a guy on the street corner with a tinfoil hat handing out a mimeograph sheet, but going online, watching YouTube videos and finding immediate confirmation and, having that rush of, oh, you're right. Here's a community. You belong. We believe you. Those other people are lying to us. Come join us. That's what makes it worse. And by the way, that's what makes it worse for not just science denial, but QAnon, Stop the Steal, the January 6th insurrection deniers. It's the same. It's the us versus them polarization that is exacerbated by the internet. Just this week, the Wall Street Journal is doing a series on Facebook showing that Facebook knows the damage that they're doing through polarization. They know, of course. And then not to mention the creation of this disinformation, which, has always been out there. But without the accelerant, without Facebook and Twitter and YouTube, I don't think we'd be where we are.
Yeah, people are getting rewarded basically for whether it's psychologically or monetarily in some cases because of the advertising that goes with it.
Yes.
For these kinds of crazy ideas. I wanted to go back to you were talking about identity, and you're talking about this idea of how core these beliefs are to someone's identity. And in relationship to Dan Kahan's 2015 study on looking at the way typically the smarter people are about science in general, the more likely they are to believe in climate change, for instance. And conversely, the less sophisticated they are in their knowledge of science, the more likely they are to believe in climate
Makes
change.
Sense.
Yeah, it's an intuitive deduction. But the thing that was striking in Dan's work was when he separated people by a political identity, found that there was real inconsistency, that the people who were more liberal tended to, the smarter they were, stronger belief in climate change, whereas the people who were more conservative, the stronger they were in their knowledge of science, actually increased their disbelief in climate change.
It's an amazing result.
So, I'm just curious about your observations of being amongst 650 folks. What were the political relationships, and were there strong identity? Was there a sense of we really are science forward about this, or what was that like?
Some areas of science denial are politicized. COVID denial, climate denial. Flat Earth is not. Anti-vax before COVID was kind of 50-50 split conservative liberal. So, it's a mistake to think that it's all politically polarized. It's all about distrust, but sometimes that distrust can be for elites or a big pharma or big government or something like that, which can also break along political lines. But it's not the things that get politicized. It's because someone politicized it. And Flat Earth, as far as I can tell, has not been politicized. The folks that I talked to hated Trump because Trump is a world leader and therefore in on the conspiracy. And they showed a slide of him with his hands on a glowing orb standing next to some high official in the Saudi government. And they thought that this was evidence that he knew the conspiracy. They also believed in climate change, because the ones that I spoke to, because they thought that there was a dome over the top of the earth. So we basically live in a terrarium. And if you live in a terrarium, you have to take care of, what's underneath that dome. So, our expectations of how this is going to break down are not always, what you think. And the third observation is some of the people I spoke to were quite intelligent. So, if you go into something like that thinking that it's, just about intelligence, you're going to run up sooner or later against somebody who knows more physics than you do, right?
Yeah.
And they're not making the right observations about it. They're not, but they've read, a lot, and they're happy to talk about it. I sat through a 15 minutes of a presentation on the Coriolis effect, and I couldn't remember from physics, what, because I knew it was drawing the wrong conclusion from the Coriolis effect, but I couldn't remember enough about what the Coriolis effect was to know where the mistake was. So Kahan's work is brilliant. I mean, the part that I want to emphasize about that finding about I think there was a graph with a kind of a red-blue split of as people got more intelligent, they tended to split on this. I think it reveals a very important thing. Beliefs are often not based on evidence. They're based on what we want to believe, on our identity. And we use the arguments to justify what we already believe. And more intelligent people are better able to summon the argumentative power to justify what they already believe. So is it really shocking that you find people at the higher end of the IQ scale more polarized, more capable science deniers, if you think of it that way, because they're not going to be blown out of the water when you say something like, well, isn't that inconsistent? They're going to be ready to talk. So you can't go into this thinking that it's just about IQ. The media always portrays it. The media makes some mistakes in the way that they portray science denial. I mean, that's one, making it sound like, it's just people who are stupid. No, they're not going to get to it that way. It's about identity. And another, if I may add something here, the other thing I think that's wrong about the way the media portrays it is that they're looking at this whole thing as if it were a function of misinformation. People just having these beliefs that, how would anybody think this? Where, why would they think that? Science denial is about disinformation. Somebody has intentionally created the theory that ivermectin works, or that rebreathing into a mask will give you CO2 poisoning. Somebody, or that there were microchips in the vaccines, or it will make you infertile. Somebody thought that up and then filtered it out through the internet, where all of these folks, intelligent or not, but gullible in a sense, right? That it hits that with that accelerant, it hits the cognitive bias and they start to believe it. So the big question here is, I think, not why do people believe this stuff, but who wants them to believe it.
Mm.
And I think that answer is a quite interesting. Now, I'm not sounding like a conspiracy theorist here.
I was going to say, we might be leaning a little bit that way here,
except that if you go back in the newspapers in March, April, there were reports from the State Department, the White House, about the fact that Russian intelligence is engaged in a disinformation campaign around health and science issues in the United States. They have troll farms that are deliberately pumping out disinformation to try to destabilize American society. And I've got the names right here. I sound like Joe McCarthy. I've got the names right here. The 4 media organizations that they are using to do so. Now that I've said it, I can read it off here. They are Newsfront, New Eastern Outlook, Oriental Review, and there was a 4th one here that I don't have listed, but there were 4, and these are controlled by Russia's Federal Security Service. And so what happens is that information gets out there, and it is re-reported by partisan media in the United States and on social media. When we're already polarized into us versus them, and Russia is kind of no longer the bad guy, from a certain point, from a certain partisan point of view, that information is maybe going to make sense. So I think that a lot of science deniers are victims. They're victims of that kind of disinformation that is, the Russian troll farms go directly for Twitter. An awful lot of those accounts are bots. So again, it's not just, we have to focus not just on the people who believe it, but why they believe it and who's creating it.
So, Lee, given all of that, and I think you bring up a number of really fascinating points here. If I'm going to go and talk to my uncle, my cousin, my high school friend who is in that science denial category, right?
It's always the uncle, isn't it?
It's always the uncle. But, how do I go about doing that? I mean, and I think this is ultimately what you're trying to get, hopefully, I think, out of this book is that we need to have those conversations, right? And don't ignore the conversations, as Tim was mentioning. It's because it is easier to ignore it. It's easier to talk about, the Viking Packer game than it is to talk about this,
It is. And here we have resources. John Cook, one of the folks that I mentioned earlier, the cognitive scientist who has, talked about the 5 tropes. He's got an app called Cranky Uncle. I kid you not.
It is always the uncle.
And that's why I set it up, right? Because you can find out, if my uncle says this, I should, what can I say back to them? Now, that's gold, right? That's wonderful.
Yeah.
And yet I want us to be careful of the idea that there are some magic words that we can say that will work every single time. It is based on the work that I've done. It's not about the magic words. It's about the person trusting you. It's about being engaging, calm, respect, patience, listening to them. That's what's going to put the person in a mood to have the kind of conversation in which you can say, but why do you believe that? I mean, the emotional aspects are key, which if you think about it, it's a problem of identity, of course, right? I heard a story recently of a young woman who was trying to convince her father that climate change was real. And he, kept quoting people that he'd seen on Fox News and, other places. And she finally said, Dad, why do you believe all of these people that you've never met, but you won't trust your own daughter? That made a difference, right? So leverage the fact that your uncle already loves and trusts you, if he does, or alternatively have the app with Cranky Uncle open in your lap at the Thanksgiving table. There was something in the New York Times. I wish I could give you the citation right now, but it was also it was an interactive thing where you could, if they say this and then click it, and then you could say this, 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 this. Now, again, it's not just about magic words, but you don't want to just stand there and go, and have nothing to say. But what I found really helpful is to just ask questions.
Okay.
Your uncle will say something outrageous, and then instead of saying, "Oh, that's ridiculous," say, "Why do you think that?" And then say, who they hear, and say, "Well, but why do you trust him?" Okay. Has this person always been trustworthy? They've never said anything wrong? Well, not that well, have you looked into that? Have you really, so I mean, you can, in as empathetic a way possible, take the temperature down and have that conversation. And, I do think we have to have these conversations with family and friends. I mean, you don't have to go to a flat earth convention. That's a really steep climb, by the way, because they already think I'm part of the conspiracy, and I'm a stranger. They don't
Right.
trust me, and I'm outnumbered. But if you're sitting at the Thanksgiving table and, you may get the stink eye from your other relatives because, don't bring this up with Uncle Jerry. But, maybe afterward, during the game, talk a little bit about this, because I can cite you so many examples, and I discuss them in the book, of hardcore deniers about vaccination, about climate change, who have changed their mind because they were approached in the right way. And by the way, I can also cite you books about people who have given up their belief in the Ku Klux Klan and white supremacy and cults. This idea of engagement and trust and listening is how they get people to change their identity and therefore change their beliefs. And, if you think of folks in the grips of science denial as, in some sense, victims, kind of makes sense.
Mm. And that gives a different perspective. And so that's wonderful. Yeah.
I loved that. I thought that was one of the really cool, maybe sort of most heartfelt parts about the book, is it's really about compassion and listening. It kind of reminds me of, we have a fellow podcaster, David McCraney. I don't know if you know David's work. He does You Are Not So Smart. Oh. And he's been really, really interested in conspiracy theories for a long time. And his big thing on talking to people who are believers in conspiracies is to start with compassion and listening. Don't start from the perspective of, I'm here to convince you, damn it, you're an idiot, I'm going to tell you all the facts. It's like, start from a compassionate perspective. They're ostensibly good people. Use a little Hanlon's razor on this.
That's right.
Not,
that's right.
It's pretty cool.
And with that compassion, Tim, I know that you're really aching to get to some music talk. So I'm being compassionate because I would go on for a long, long time with Lee, but I know you're aching to get to some music. So
I hope you can tell that we've spent all this time talking about your book because we thought it was fantastic. And putting off music is always very difficult.
It is.
So we are at a point though where we have to get in a little bit of understanding about what's on your playlist these days. And have you adopted a COVID playlist? Did your playlist change in the last year and a half?
I'll tell you, in the car. So I've been a Beatles fan my entire life, but because of COVID, my wife stopped. My wife, who's a physician, I mean, she's frontline in the fight against COVID. I thought, she takes enough risk every day. She shouldn't be taking public transportation. No more subway. I'm just going to drive her in every day. So, wow. I drive her in with the dogs in the back seat, a whole family, we go and take her into work. And then on the way home, I bought all the Beatles CDs that I already have on vinyl.
Of course
I do. Right.
Yeah. We bought them. Yeah.
But I listened to them again, and my respect for the Beatles is just incredible. I've now listened to the same songs over and over again enough times that I think I'm kind of figuring out what makes a Beatles song. The really amplified bass, the harmonies, how they're doing it. And I'm a very, very, very amateur musician myself. And so my personal challenge is to learn how to play my favorite Beatles songs. So during COVID, I said, I'm not just going to listen to this. I'm going to play it because I've got no excuse now. I'm home all day, every day. And I'm going to learn how to play some Beatles songs. And, not just a little lick here and there, but the whole song. So my playlist now for what I want to learn to play is, I love George Harrison. So it's Here Comes the Sun, my favorite song of all time. While My Guitar Gently Weeps, Something, Blackbird, and Hide Your Love Away. Those are the 5 that I can kind of play now and I've started with.
Right.
And Beatles all day. Right here, 2 feet away from me, I've got a framed black and white photo that I got from eBay of the Beatles the night that they played on Ed Sullivan, February 9th, 1964, the night that they made it. And, because I want to, it's just cool. I'm a big Beatles fan.
We have a good friend, Dan Hill, who is also a podcaster who adores Beatles, and he and I go back and forth on best Beatles song, best Beatles album. What, just out of curiosity, what is there one album that you think really stands out as their best work?
If I had 16 minutes to live, I would listen to the medley on the flip side of Abbey Road. Starting with Because all the way through, Golden Slumbers and the whole thing. Here Comes the Sun is my favorite song, also on the flip side of Abbey Road. So I probably, if I could extend it, if I could just beg for a little more time, I would listen to that too. But the second side of Abbey Road is great. And that whole medley, I tried to start to learn that on the guitar. Oh man, Because on the guitar, I watched one guy just with my jaw open on YouTube do it. It's incredible. Just impossibly difficult to do.
And then you've got McCartney's voice and his vocal range to deal with as well. You're trying to sing it.
And he's an incredible bass player. People don't realize that. I mean, if you listen, one thing about Beatles songs, as I've said, is you can actually hear the bass. I'm sure McCartney insisted. But when you listen to the songs again and again, you listen to the drums, you listen to the bass, you try to isolate a different thing. He's an incredible bass player. And I'm not ever going to listen to anybody criticize Ringo. They're always saying, oh, he wasn't even the best drummer in the Beatles. Ha ha. Yeah. There's one recording I've got is Strawberry Fields Forever that they didn't use with a kind of a drum thing at the end. He's absolutely incredible. So I love, I listen to other things, but right now I'm really into the Beatles all over again. And, great respect. And it's, by the way, it's just so much fun to be able to play something that I listen to and think, I will never be able to do that. But again, YouTube, you go, Marty Schwartz has all of these, and I don't know the man, I'm not plugging him. It's just that he's a great teacher on YouTube. And, he will show, you want to play the solo from something, here's how to do it. It really, really a lot of fun.
So there is some positive to the internet. It's not
there
all.
YouTube giveth and YouTube taketh away. That's right.
We've done a little research on this. So Mary actually has done some research on this. But tell us about your thoughts about listening to music while you're working.
I cannot do it. That's it. Mary's good. I can't remember whether I ever said that in public before just now, but maybe I did. It just breaks my flow. I just cannot. I have to have complete silence. I'll turn on that's not true. Actually, I turn on a kind of a white noise machine. And,
wow.
And my dogs are always with me when I'm working, but I can't have any music. Now, compared to Stephen King, who apparently blasts, AC/DC at top volume while he's writing, I don't, and I mean, he's a master. How does he? Well,
he's a machine. He is a machine.
He is, and I've tried my hand at writing fiction too. So I thought, well, maybe this is just a nonfiction thing, because I'm thinking so much about building this brick wall of argument. How philosophers write. I hope I don't write like that anymore. I'm writing for a general audience now, stories. But I thought maybe with fiction it's different. Nope. can't write a word of fiction if I've got music playing. Even just instrumental, even just guitar music in the background. And I think it's because I love music so much that I want to concentrate on it. Music for me is not background. It would be like having a comedian or some other form of artistry on in the background. You want to pay attention to it. So when I've got music playing, that's all I'm doing.
Yeah.
Lee, you sound exactly like Tim. Tim is, it was almost like the soundtrack that you just said was out of Tim's mouth. He said the same, almost word for word of what you've just said there.
Tim and I had a bond here because what you don't know is that the 2 minutes before the podcast started, he caught me playing guitar to put my dogs to sleep here so that they're not bugging us. So we started off talking about guitar for a minute.
Yeah.
So that
man.
absolutely.
Lee, thank you. This has been absolutely fascinating and I think really informative and providing a lot of good, just solid framework for people to be A, thinking about this, but B, then actually how do you go about, talking with these people? Because we do interact with them on an everyday basis. And so thank you for that. And we really appreciate your time and insights on this.
Thank you very much. And if you ever convince your cranky uncle, I want to hear about it. Okay, I really do, because like I said, I didn't convince any of those flat earthers, and the coal miners that I spoke to all believed in climate change. So, I'm ready for hear a success story.
Fantastic.
We will share it. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Welcome to our grooving session where Tim and I groove on what we learned from our discussion with Lee, have a free-flowing conversation, and talk about whatever else comes into our flat brains.
Flat.
As in like flat earth. They're not this glow walnut shapey thing. They're flat. Didn't you know that? It's been a whole lie that we have these kind of things. Our brains are flat.
All the while, I trusted my mom.
I trusted the scientists. I trusted all those scans. I trusted the actual being able to look at my skull and seeing that it's kind of dome shaped. Well, particularly my skull, being there's no hair on it. But no, underneath it, brain is flat, right in the middle of our brain, right in the middle of our skull. Yep, right down there.
Well, now that we got that decided, is there anything else we need to talk about?
I give Lee huge kudos.
Yeah.
My God, I would be freaked out going into a convention with the idea that I hold a totally opposite belief than the people that are there. It's amazing to me. And I give them big kudos. I wish I was that brave. I'm not.
Yeah, the closest thing to being an undercover cop or a spy. Now he wasn't. He did not hold back. I mean, he was not actually trying to spy on them. That was absolutely not his intent. He was very open about what he was doing, but I still couldn't. I could only imagine feeling like I don't belong here.
Well, and alone. Nobody there to support, nobody to go back to that hotel room and go, oh my God, did you just see what the crazy there? No, that was not it at all.
That's right.
It was alone. And what's fascinating about that is it's kind of this real world experimentation. And I think a lot of people used to do that kind of stuff, that going out there and experiencing it for myself to really understand, to get that phenomenological element of this, of being able to immerse yourself in this, as opposed to just researching this from afar, that you are researching it in the hurricane, right? You're the hurricane chaser that gets caught up in that hurricane. And I think that's fascinating. And I think there's probably some really insights that he got from that you don't get any other way, which I thought was really fascinating.
I agree. He just deserves so much applause for that. There was something he talked about, this idea that I wanted to spend just a minute on, and this was the idea of changing minds isn't a hit and run. That I think that it's our easy button is always looking for what's that one fact, that one tidbit that I can drill into my crazy uncle's head, and then instantly he'll stop arguing that chemtrails are real. Like it'll just be this one thing, and then boom, I'll be done. I won't have to worry about it anymore. It's not that. It's a conversation. It's going to take a long time. You have to start with just planting a seed of doubt. And of course, and we've talked about this with this whole conspiracy theory series is centered around starting with listening, right? So I just want to mention that.
Yeah, it takes time, right? And particularly as he talked about, look, they're believing this for a reason, that there was some breach of trust, as he said, at some point that kind of led them down this path. And now their identity is wrapped up in it. Their community is part of this. And so you're not going to dissuade somebody from this belief with that perfect antidote of this wonderful fact of we have 8,000 trillion different, camera images of a round globe Earth. That's not going to change their mind, right? But if you listen to them and you talk to them and you start, and this is a common reoccurring theme too, is don't necessarily attack the facts or the argument, right? It's looking at the arguments as opposed to the facts. It's the logic behind this, and that is the piece. And to that degree, planting that seed to say, oh, okay, that makes some sense there. Or yeah, if I hold that, then I have to think this as well. And if I think that, ooh, all right, that's difficult. So
yeah. Well, and we need to remind ourselves that that's the way that we're going to approach it. That as someone who might be arguing against it, we're going to be looking for logical, foul ups, little things that we can nick and sort of question. But on their end, on the person on Uncle Tom's end, it's an identity issue. Right. It's gonna feel like something. It isn't going to just register cognitively with a logical discussion. It's going to hurt to have to kind of question himself and really take a step back because it's so closely tied to identity.
Yeah, both self and social identity. Again,
right.
This is who I am, particularly in some of these real beliefs where people are spending money to go to a convention.
Right.
I mean, they're paying airplane tickets, hotel, gas money to drive there, all the, living up, plus the conference facilitation fees, all of that. So they've invested that. And to do that, you have to have pretty strong feelings on that. And beyond that, it's their community. These are the people who, are accepting of you, and it's this element of you against the world. So it's you with your people, your tribe. And now, because that tribe is agreeing on these things, you are facing this world that is trying to come in. And so you do a lot to defend from those outward threats. And that feels like if you let your guard down, you're letting the tribe down.
Yeah, absolutely. What else did you want to group on, Kurt? Because there's lots of things to talk about with our conversation with Lee.
There was. I think one of the big things is just listening, right? And we've talked about this, and I'm going back to a conversation we had on another interview with Kwame Christian about compassionate curiosity.
Yeah.
And although we, lead and talk about it, I think it fits. This is the way that we need to be thinking about having our conversations with these science deniers, is have some curiosity. Why are they denying this? But have that with compassion. Have that conversation with them with a point of trying to really understand, and do that with some heart, with some giving, with some compassion.
Could I just say that it's a good way to live? Just like approaching the whole damn world, especially the people that you love, right? That you hold dear in your life, approach those conversations with compassionate curiosity. man, the world could be a better place. I mean, this is more than just a do-gooder kind of strategy. This is like really make a difference in the world, as far as I'm concerned.
I would agree. I would agree 100%.
Something I wanted to go through was the 5 patterns of science deniers and conspiracy theories that Lee talked about. I thought maybe we could just kind of quickly clarify on those. What do you say? Would you be up for that?
If I can pick which pieces of that I can use, then yes. If I can just cherry pick a couple of them not all of them, because, why would I do all of them when I can only just cherry pick the ones that are going to support my point of view?
Which is number 1, by the way.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it is?
Yeah.
Wow, see? Cherry picking data. I know. I mean, and I don't know about you, but we've been in these conversations, or at least these email or social media exchanges, and it's surprising because if you start looking at it, you go, yep, they're picking that one study out of all of the hundreds of studies that have been done. They're picking the one study that they're going to pull out and
right.
use that, the one survey, the one whatever. And that is always a way of, not really being forthright. And one of the things that they do.
Yeah.
What's the second one, Tim?
You're on a roll. Keep going. What's number 2?
All right. So belief in conspiracy theories is what Lee was saying. And this was from, I can't remember exactly who it was. So this is the one that I have the biggest, I don't know, it kind of feels redundant, right? If I'm a conspiracy theory, I have belief in conspiracy theories. It's kind of, I think you had said it best in an earlier conversation. I'm a thief and I steal things. It's kind of like,
I believe in stealing. Yeah, I'm a thief. Yeah, right.
So as I started to think about this, and I don't know, I'd love your thoughts on this. Maybe it's more around the idea that people act in bad faith, that there are forces out there that don't have a good intent, that we can't trust people. So there's a lack of trust going on there. I don't know. Your thoughts?
Yeah. I don't know if Lee was intending this completely, but it certainly seems like this lack of faith in other people kind of comes from things being broken early on. And I think that we've had a conversation with one of our guests about this idea that, if you crack certain aspects of relationship in your youth, that it can be very difficult to rebuild that in adulthood, and that's going to open up the door to conspiracy theory belief, because it's like, I'm not going to trust the authorities on that. I'm not going to trust NASA that all those pictures of that round Earth are actually real. They're all concocted.
Yeah, because we have to have 185,000 people on payroll to make all of those
that's
pictures.
Right.
But obviously, there's somebody out there that's paying for that.
That's what all those people at NASA are doing. They're just photoshoppers. That's basically it. A bunch of high-paid, photoshoppers.
Actors, photoshoppers. Yeah. Oh, I didn't see. Those are things I didn't realize.
Well, and that leads to the number 3 item, which is illogical reasoning, right? When our reasoning is cracked, when we give into this idea that we're going to agree to the concept that the Earth is, actually flat, we're going to disregard the logic that goes behind it. And I think that we've talked about this on other episodes about how important it is when you're talking to science deniers or conspiracy theorists that you start with talking about their logic and how they construct these ideas, not so much the facts that they're buying into.
Yeah. And makes 100% of, the ideas that we think about really come to bear when we're thinking about this, because if you have a logical reasoning, then the facts themselves don't matter. And that's part of what goes on there.
Yeah. What's number 4?
Well, I'm a doctor, right? And so you should let me do surgery on you because I'm a doctor. And therefore I am an expert in everything. because I do. I am a bona fide doctor. And so
you are.
You're going to let me do that hip replacement surgery that you need,
I was
right?
hoping that it was going to be for my brain surgery.
Oh, well, that one on your flat brain. See, that's where I could really get into it. So, yeah.
That would be number 4, which is the reliance on fake experts.
Yes.
Fake experts, right. That's the deal. Yeah, we need to move away from this idea that just because you make a claim or you have one tiny bit of evidence from your personal observations in life that you've become an actual expert, because there is a meaningful difference between someone who sees something, claims that they, has some kind of evidence to demonstrate that they experience that, and now all of a sudden they're expert at it. And that's just not real.
And you see this all the time, or at least I've seen it recently with COVID and some of people coming in and have done a Google search, and they come in and they say, I've done all this research and look at here, this is how this is spreading. And these are the cures that you can use. And just need to get to herd immunity. And you're going, and you got that from 30 minutes on Google. And now you're an expert versus the epidemiologist who's been studying this for his or her entire life and has done, research on this and really understands how viruses spread and what that does in the body. Anyway, that's absolutely there. And the last one, and this is the one that I find really fascinating, because I didn't really, the others you kind of get, right? But this was the one that struck me as really profound, is this idea that science needs to be perfect. This idea that, look, I can discredit anything that you say because I can find one instance where that isn't true. And so that is perfectly reasonable in mathematics and in, some of those, maybe even some of the harder sciences, but not in the social sciences. This is the piece that I think is really interesting. Again, getting into science education and all of those facts, that a contrary component, this goes into the replication crisis that we have. Just because you have one study that shows something different doesn't make the hundreds of other studies that showed that it was true now false. It is indeed just this idea that it is adding additional insight into what are the ways that phenomena is coming to life, the fruition of whatever that is, and that there's modifiers and that there's inhibitors. And now we have a better understanding, but it doesn't discount that entirety of research behind it. And so therefore you can just throw everything out. So in other words, well, what about, the way that, whatever works on this and that was proved to be not true. Okay, fine. But that doesn't mean that the earth is now flat because of that.
Yeah. Science of any kind, hard sciences, soft sciences, whatever it is, anything that there is research involved in is going to change. We believed in Euclidean geometry and we believed in Newtonian physics as if they were gospel. They were actually cast in stone until Einstein comes along and the thinkers in his era and kind of said, well, wait a minute, what if we looked at it this way? And then develop proofs to look at things that way. So even hard sciences can change. I mean, yes, 1 and 1 is always going to equal 2. But
look at that. But even that, so within that, Newtonian physics still holds true in most instances.
Exactly,
in pretty much
it does.
Everything on this earth, Newtonian physics is still true. Right? It's only at the large and small scale that
it's not that it's not true. It's not that it doesn't hold water. It does.
Yeah. It does, which is the thing about this holding, things true. So I'm going to quote from a response to a social media post that was out there again on this. And it was a post on biases that I put out there. And this response said this, along with like multiple other posts that are responses that this person put into this whole thing, just kind of going off on this whole thing.
Okay.
One bias is that science requires a consensus or a predominance. It only takes one human to prove something wrong. One, that is scientific. Science is about observation and debate. Science changes just like the efficacy of vaccines and the promises of politicians made.
Wow.
Wow. Just
Vitriol.
like, oh my God. This is, no one person doesn't prove something wrong. If there's a predominance of evidence that leads this, that has been valid, that is, gone through all of the steps, then that one piece adds to that information. And in a situation, it may be wrong, but it does not discount the entirety of that data that has been gathered before that. Sorry if I got all excited about that.
Well, every time someone sails across the ocean is evidence that there's that observation that the Earth is not flat, because you get, it's just not. You get out there and you're in the big blue between continents, and you can see nothing but water. And then eventually, guess what? The mountains come up from the other shore, and you start to see it. But so we have observation after observation after observation. We have massive amounts of data collected scientifically about the Earth. We just don't.
Tim, water doesn't stay on a spinning tennis ball. And so if the Earth was a globe and it's spinning in space, all the water would fly off. I mean, there's proof right there.
Wow.
Which is, again, why you don't argue facts where you argue about logic.
Then we have to ask them in that conversation, we'd ask, well, does gravity exist?
Yeah.
Is there any gravity? What's the logical foundation for something like that? All right.
Enough on this one, you think?
I think so. Yeah.
All right.
I think
so.
Fun
That wraps this up. And, at the beginning, I talked about how I was a little bit worried, and this whole series has been worrisome, but I do agree. You convinced me that there's some hope. I'm leaving here with some hope.
Good.
And that, I'm not fully deflated that we can never overcome conspiracy theories.
Okay. Well, good. I'm glad you're not fully deflated. I hope you've still got some air in your tires, and that you're leaving a little bit more hopeful. That's good. Listeners, groovers, remember, we have 2 more episodes that are focused on conspiracy theories, and there's just lots of wonderful stuff ahead in the next couple of weeks, so you can learn even more, not just about the psychology behind them, but how to deal with them. That's an important part of it.
And remember, if you like our shows, share them with a friend or leave a review. We are growing fast because of you and the other listeners of Behavioral Grooves doing just that.
Yeah, and if you have any uncles, and
they are always uncles, Tim. They are always those crazy uncles.
Or friends or acquaintances, anyone that believes in conspiracy theories, we'd love to hear about them. So we've got this new Twitter thread of #ConspiracyGroove, where you can just share those stories with us on Twitter, talk about everything that bugs you about them, all the wonderful things that you've tried with using logic to have conversations with them. We want to hear all of those stories. So go ahead and use #ConspiracyGroove.
Right. And with that, please take this time to go out and logically think about the world and find your groove.